Well, welcome everyone. We really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to join today's webinar, Simplify Your SAP BW Migration to HANA with a Cloud Approach and Save Big. We hope to answer all of your technical questions in today's webinar, from getting your cloud migration path for BW to HANA. We'll be starting the webinar shortly, but first a few housekeeping notes. Only our presenters' phones are live. Your microphones have been muted by default to block any background noise. At the end of the presentation, you can type your question and answer into the Q&A function in the chat function or chat window on your webinar sidebar, and we will get to your question at the end of the presentation. And lastly, this webinar will be recorded and a link will be made available to all attendees. Now I would like to introduce today's presenters, Patrick Osterhaus, President and Chief Technology Officer for Protera Technologies, and Pete Dittmars, Director of Client Services for Protera Technologies. Take it away.
All right, welcome everybody. This is Pete Dittmars. As Kristen mentioned, I'm the Director of Client Services at Protera. One of my many hats that I wear here at Protera is running our project management office. So I have plenty of experience with all sorts of migrations involving SAP and AWS. So that is what my role is here. I want to tell you a little bit about Protera, who we are and what we do, and then we'll get into the nuts and bolts a little bit as we move on through the slides. So Protera Technologies was founded in 1998. We're coming up on 20 years in the business. Founded by some former SAP employees. We're headquartered in Chicago. We've got a little over 200 employees worldwide. Our main offices are here in the Chicago area, as well as Athens, Greece. We also have employees and other additional offices located around the world, including Mexico and India. Our customer base is also global, with a lot of customers locally here in the U.S., but additionally we have customers around the world in multiple geographies, including Europe and Latin America. Protera supports hosting and managed services for any SAP-centric organization. So while SAP is our main focus, we do offer support for other applications that our customers may want hosted as well. Our main criteria, though, is that it is an SAP-centric organization. Get into the details of our services a little later in the slides, but our main services are our Protera AppCare platform, which is our hosting and managed services platform, and Protera FlexBridge, which is our migration process and tool. And we'll get into that in quite a bit of detail as we move on here. Just a note here, and you guys can take a look at the slides after we're done here. This will be recorded and available. But we have numerous certifications from SAP, Amazon, SUSE. A few of them noted here: hosting, mobile, cloud services, HANA, and application managed services. But we can provide a full list as needed. Again, mentioned the certifications. Protera, with regard to our partnership with Amazon, we've been an AWS partner since 2011, an SAP partner since 1998. We actually have been a user of AWS since about 2008. So we have about as much experience as anybody in the industry with regards to working with AWS and SAP. 15 plus SAP references on AWS. That's probably a little bit outdated. We've got quite a few more customers than that we've put in Amazon over the last year or so. Done all sorts of AWS migrations involving SAP, moving from either on-premises, locally hosted, or with a third-party hosting provider, moving into AWS. So we can pretty much handle any combination of inbound migrations to Amazon. A little more detail about the Protera AppCare platform. As I mentioned, this is our hosting and managed services platform. We can support all the way down to the infrastructure level within a private cloud, public cloud, or even on-premises implementations. And that support goes from the infrastructure up through the database, the application, and the help desk. And again, here listed on the right, just some examples of some of the things that we will support. not just the SAP as I mentioned, but also Office 365, SharePoint, and other OS and DB implementations. Again, we're just looking for SAP-centric customers and whatever ancillary products they have with that. This slide just gives a little more detail about the AppCare platform. It encompasses not just the technology, but it's also the people, our subject matter experts, the products we have, including our FlexBridge migration tool, which we'll get into a little bit later in the presentation here, and then our numerous processes that we support as well. So again, AppCare platform is a combination of all this. It's the products, the technology, the processes, and of course the people. A little bit more about Protera and how we do our migrations. We will work with customers from the early design phase to understand what their requirements are. We've got a standard set of project plans for doing migrations, particularly with doing migrations to AWS. We will take our standard plans and work with the customer to come up with a custom solution for their particular migration needs. So like I said, we'll be with you from the design phase to the deployment and the actual migration, and then the steady state support as well. So some advantages to working with Protera and Amazon. As you can see here, the flexibility, scalability, agility, security, efficiency. You'll see these terms over and over again when working with AWS, which is why they're an important partner to Protera. And again, we're here to help you come up with a custom solution. We will leverage our standard solutions and standard plans to make things as seamless and quick and easy to implement as possible. But again, we do offer the flexibility and scalability to meet whatever needs you may have. Finally, again, just to highlight the three main areas of Protera support. FlexBridge is our migration tool and process. We'll talk about that quite a bit here. AppCare, again, is our infrastructure hosting and managed services support. And Protera ProServe, this is our additional SAP consulting services. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Patrick.
All right, thank you, Mr. Pete. All right, so we'll jump in here with the next steps of our agenda. The next piece here is we're going to talk a little bit about AWS for SAP and what that all encompasses, because this will set up the stage here for our main content, talking about the migrations of BW into AWS. So a little bit about what's supported today. We can see these SAP solutions. On the left side, it's the applications themselves, of which today we're focused upon SAP Business Warehouse. Within this category, we can also introduce the topic of BW for HANA. A lot of new information coming up in this area that was released just 2 weeks ago at SAP TechEd. We don't cover much data on BW for HANA in this webinar. The focus is on BW. In a future webinar, we will go more deep into BW for HANA. But certainly it is supported, as well as all these other applications. So if you're looking to move your BW system into AWS, you're most likely probably thinking about some other applications. And by and large, pretty much everything that SAP has is now supported in AWS. You can also see in the middle the databases. SAP HANA is supported. We also see a lot of interest in SAP ASC, the side-based database that is fully supported. And then also on the right side, you can see the supported operating systems and databases. So again, SAP HANA as a platform is fully supported back to the first version of 1.0 and now the new version 2.0, which companies are adopting quickly. And also we'll talk briefly about the advantages of running SUSE Linux Enterprise Server for your HANA compute. This is a slide that talks to all the certified compute instances in AWS for SAP. You can see on the left side focuses on the non-HANA systems. The right side is HANA and S/4HANA. And you can also see the scale up to 4 terabytes here now. That was newly released around Sapphire this year, just a few months ago. And you can also see there in the sizing, the differences in SAPs and the rating, which is a scale of how powerful that system is. So you can get a sizing in do a quick landscape design with those compute and what SAPs would fit your environment best. As I mentioned, this new system, 4 terabyte, was released at Sapphire. Being this is a focus on BW, we should also describe and have some information around the scale-out capability. Scale-out for HANA is available just for the OLAP systems, so the analytical systems BW certainly fits in there, where you can pair the systems together, group them up, cluster them, and scale that out to 34 terabytes today. So that is the max limit in scale-out. Other big news that was released at Sapphire this year was in 2018, we can expect up to 16 terabytes per instance. So that is the scale up. So very soon, next few months, we're going to have an option all the way up to 16 terabytes, which is amongst the biggest workloads we've seen in SAP. So it'll be very good to see that being released. For SAP compute running in Amazon, there is a few requirements that SAP has, and that is around the compute, which we saw, the instances that you're going to run. It's also requirements around networking, which you can see shown here, as well as the storage, which is shown in the red with the EBS volume. So there's very specific requirements, especially around HANA, high network requirements, and also high I/O capabilities for those servers. And you can also see requirements around the networking itself. So running a VPC, which is the virtual private cloud, having that defined, as well as having an encrypted connection, either being a VPN site-to-site or the direct connect, to make sure you have a secure encrypted tunnel between your corporate landscape and network to the AWS environment. All requirements, so you gotta consider that in the design. We have many use cases, and happy to say we have case studies for every single one of these. We have numerous other webinars we've done which talk to all these in detail, and today we're going to focus again on the BW space, on upgrades and migrations. So we have two really great case studies we'll show at the end, talking about their migrations and the business value they've captured going to AWS. So now that we have our requirements, we know what we can run there, let's talk about what you want to do with your environment and doing your assessment, taking a look at what we need to check before we can do a migration and upgrade. So we can consider all these areas. Some of these are generic for any kind of migration or upgrade you're going to do. You have to get a good assessment of the landscape and the SAP systems you have today, and that's doing a profile. You can look at the sizing information, all the versions of the operating system, the database, the SAP application itself, and then going through the numerous system prep that's required. And we have the next slide is going to just highlight things to look at. There's a lot of information specifically for BW on HANA, that steps that have to be done. So these are cleansing, clean housekeeping tasks that have to be done, as well as minimizing the size of the system. So many steps should be checked there, as well as looking at the migration considerations. So we want to look at, for example, if your systems are not Unicode, there might be some additional remediation that has to be done before migration, or maybe we can combine it within the migration itself, as well as getting some good ideas around migration time estimation. So not only the project plan itself, which we'll talk to at a high level here in a few minutes, but also trying to estimate the downtime for when we'll have to take the system down. And we have some really good examples of what we were able to do for customers in that exact scenario. And then lastly, another big consideration is looking at your architecture, all your systems, and determining if there's any remediation around the Java systems, if they exist, if there are dual stack, and if there's any steps that have to be done to get that ready for a migration. As I mentioned, many cleanup, and you could have a webinar just for an hour just to talk about just these steps. So if you have any questions, any guidance that we can provide, happy to give you that information. Just didn't want to have a bunch of text on the page, but as you can see here in our word cloud here, these are all the things that have to be considered. There's a really good blog posting that has the 14 steps that you should perform for BW for HANA migrations. These are some of them. But happy to go through considerations there. Just wanted, for essence of time and not to have too much confusion on one slide, we didn't put them in here, but happy to pass that along. And this is a very new slide. This information came from SAP Tech Ed just a few weeks ago. The premise here is the paths that companies are going to take ultimately to go to SAP HANA, or I should say SAP BW 7.5 on SAP HANA, which we're seeing as a very popular route. And ultimately, if a company is interested and wants to go to SAP BW for HANA, ultimately the steps that are going to be required there. Again, today we're going to focus on the BW on HANA. We also have a case study on BobJ. So both those scenarios, we can talk to those conversions and those upgrades. The BW for HANA, that will be a future webinar. But in essence, and we'll look at these in details of what the steps and the approach for doing the combination of a conversion and upgrade and migration at the same time. So we can go from a lower version of BW or BobJ and upgrade it and move to AWS Cloud at the same time. And obviously, as is shown here, a new installation is always the option, and especially for BW to recreate the info cubes and do it anew. Our focus here today is on migration. So with that, we'll talk about our standard project plans, what we're going to do from a high level. And as we'll see, there's more details that are provided within our assessment, and we'll talk about that here in a few minutes. But if I can hand it back to Pete, he can talk about the project plans from his PMO office.
Yeah, thanks. So I've mentioned standard FlexBridge project plans several times. We use these standard plans for high-level discussions, initial conversations. Ultimately, we understand that everybody's environment is different, and one plan is not going to fit everybody. So we use our standard FlexBridge plan as a jumping-off point for putting together a customized plan for each particular customer environment. One of the real beauties of our FlexBridge tool is the automated assessment, and that's the first step here. It's a small ABAP program that we ask you to install on one of your source systems, and that assessment will run, and it generates a report that the Protera FlexBridge tool can use to then analyze your source system and determine what the target needs to look like, or if there's any red flags in the source, referring back to those 14 cleanup items that Pat mentioned a minute ago, if there's anything that needs to be done in the source environment before we can set up our automated migrations. So that's really a nice tool that we have that we will send out to a customer to, again, load and run on one of their source systems to give us that information. Based on the information we get out of that assessment, it helps us determine what the target landscape needs to look like, and then also gives us some information for building that final, more detailed, customized project plan. Once we have that information, we always want to do a proof of concept or a test run, whatever the terminology is in your organization. Essentially, running a migration, at least one iteration, on a copy of your production environment, so we can understand what the migration is going to look like, what the run times are going to look like, and through iterations, we can optimize what your final cutover is going to look like as well. I know generally the goal is to minimize downtime to the production environment, and that's what we like to do with these test runs, is put together a plan that will almost always get these HANA migrations done, not only within one weekend, but often within one day or half a day of downtime. So we achieve that through these proof of concept or test runs. Once we complete a test run, we'll turn it over to the customer or their functional team to do validations of the system, confirm everything is working as expected. The time frame for doing these validations is completely up to the customer and to what extent they want to do their testing. But we usually expect at least a week or two of testing there before we move on to the real migrations. Okay. While that testing is going on in the proof of concept environment, we'll be working on the Protera side to build your optimized target landscape. And again, that's based on the information we get out of that automated assessment report. Finally, once everybody's signed off on the proof of concept, we will schedule out the live migrations of your dev, QA, and prod systems. And again, the focus here is minimize the downtime. So often these migrations will start during the week or even a week before the downtime is scheduled. And then we'll plan to do a downtime starting on a Friday night or a Saturday morning and try to get all that downtime done within a day or so. And then finally, once you're fully migrated to Amazon, we move into steady state support. within the Protera AppCare platform. And again, that's the 24/7/365 monitoring of your systems, along with assigned personal resources that will understand your environment and be ready to respond to anything that may come up. Okay, so this is an example of a migration plan. I know I mentioned earlier that we do all sorts of combinations of on-premise to Amazon, or from third-party private cloud or public cloud to Amazon. This is an example of an on-premises installed dev, QA, and prod moving to Amazon. So what we do is, our first step is to take a copy of the production environment, and this is that test run or proof of concept that I talk about. So if you look at this slide, everything on the top is AWS, everything on the bottom is the existing customer landscape. So looking at that orange circle 1, first step, create a copy of prod on premises, because we want this migration to look exactly like the final production migration is going to look. Sometimes customers come to us and say, hey, why don't we start with a copy of prod in Amazon? It's easier to spin that up. We understand that, but at the same time, like I said, we want that proof of concept run to look exactly like your live production run, so there's no surprises during that cutover weekend. So we start with a copy of production on premises, step 1 there. We will migrate that to HANA in Amazon. That's step 2, and that's where you see with the blue number 3 up there in the Amazon box, that you now have your migrated production system on HANA. At that point, we'll turn over that test system or the proof of concept system to the functional team, whether that's part of the customer's team or if there's a system integrator. They will do their end-to-end business testing. Again, this often takes a week, 2 weeks, or even more, depending on the complexity of your environment and how thorough your testing is going to be. Once everybody's reviewed the system and agreed it looks good, we'll ask for sign-off on that test run, and then we will move into the live migrations. Again, here's where we can do a little bit of customizing of the plan, depending on how many iterations you want to do, what's required by your business and perhaps by your auditors. But a pretty standard plan would be to migrate your dev system, and then your QA, and then your prod. So you can see in step 4 there, we're migrating the dev system to HANA on Amazon, and then the QA system will either be migrated, or the alternative would be we migrate production to Amazon. After the smoke clears, we would do a system copy of prod down to QA. Again, that's all negotiable. It depends on your particular requirements.
All right. Once the smoke clears, I like that. The smoke test. So we're going to move right into the cloud migration. So probably good reasons why you're looking at moving to AWS. These are probably some of those reasons. And we see these as the big trends in IT. We want to be able to respond to our users' needs very quickly, increasing our agility for that. So being able to deploy systems very, very quickly, take standard images from vendors or even our own, and create systems and create copies from those. So that's certainly a key benefit of going to AWS. Increasing the flexibility. So pretty much anywhere in the world you want to be able to build a system, you can. And anywhere you want to set up disaster recovery or high availability, you can do it very, very easily and quickly within AWS. And then the scalability, where I saw an article just yesterday where they talk about how does IT now make decisions in this unlimited resource world, where now you can have unlimited resources at any moment, and you can bring them down when you don't need them. So it changes operationally how your business works. So certainly it's a good driver to have those benefits and those options. And doing all this while we reduce the cost and complexity of our solutions. So again, playing this journey, how do we do this? We're going to talk about with FlexBridge how we solve these problems. One of the big things, though, is around the migration path. And Pete talked about our methodology in a high level of our approach, taking a test run first on production. That is something that certainly we see great value of. And I'll also say that and mention that customers like to have this period of time where it's a good 3 or 4 months, because this is their new system, the new version. That's where they get to turn on all the features and see how their business is going to be different. And if there's any scope creep of things that they want to add now that they couldn't even see previously, especially around the Fiori front end for HANA and around the analytical tools, some things that they can add. So specifically for BW, this is a great time where they're going to see that in the migration is the test run, and then having that up, and that's a point of reference system for the whole migration, so they can always use that as comparison. Again, the milestones we're going to look at, timing. As Pete said, each project is unique, but we always want to apply our best practices, make sure the ways that we do migrations are always followed, and the lessons learned from past systems migrations are always applied here. We're always going to look at downtime. That's a big key consideration, a big factor of when we can move, and don't want to have a big impact or any impact to the business. So minimizing downtime, and then looking at obviously the cost and risk and any remediation has to be done. So our solution to that is with the solution that we're going to talk about again next few minutes. Tool that is used for simplifying this move, going to the latest versions of SAP applications in AWS. So types of migrations, we want to cover this just as your approach. So if you have a system today, let's say for example you have BW 7.0 and you want to move this to the cloud, if there is a driver that you have to go to cloud first and you don't have the time or the budget yet to move, upgrade, you can do a lift and shift, what's called, and that's literally just copying the system over to the cloud. A lot of options to do this. The big key consideration here is you have to make sure that source system, I should take that back. You don't have to make sure. It's not a showstopper if the system is not today running, capable to run in AWS. For example, if it's a Unix system or if it's mainframe or if it's iSeries, there is some other things you can do to convert those. But in a sense, it's more of just copying that system over to the cloud and doing a lift and shift. So we're copying that over, and a lot of options there. Third-party tools provide this, as well as backup and restore capabilities. To add a new feature, enable more options, is we can combine the move to AWS with other transformations. So we can transform, we can do a migration of the OS and the database, and we can combine the HANA migration, going to the HANA platform and database, as well as doing the SAP application upgrade. So again, we're going to talk specifically today around the BW space, and that's where our case studies are. So we'll get to that in just a moment. So we introduced this idea on FlexBridge. We'll talk very quickly about what this provides. So again, this idea of combining these very long projects of doing a cloud migration, doing an SAP upgrade, and doing a migration conversion to HANA all at the same time. So key point is not only cost savings, but simplification of a project and the minimization of the business involvement, so you don't have multiple test cycles that have to be done for each one of these steps. So instead of picking these up as separate pieces, you combine them and put them into one project. And how we do this with FlexBridge is our Lifecycle, where we first start with this assessment. As Pete mentioned, we have an automated assessment report that we can provide. Attendees here at this webinar today can get it for free, and we'll have information on how you can get that source code so you can start the process off. And then to follow Pete's overview on the project plans, we're going to have from the assessment a sample project plan that will, in the future, going forward after a test run, customize that to how many runs of production copies you want to do and the testing that you want to do with your business, your functional team, and your SI. And then again, the execution, error correction, and then the summarization of the migration upgrade. So the assessment report, again, automated report that's going to provide high-level approach on the migration upgrade and move to AWS. How we get there, as Pete mentioned, you get source code. We're going to provide it in a transport. We can actually give you the source code if you want to see it instead of putting it in a transport. You run this program, and the program is going to generate a text file in an XML format, and you send that back to us. And then within a couple of days, we will have a report that is going to talk to your environment specifically and the approach to go to AWS. This report includes an executive summary, so a very high level, few pages that summarizes the rest of the report. The rest of the report is going to have the source system information for your landscape, specifically what you're running today, and then going through those steps and those identification of areas that have to be remediated before you migrate. And then we'll also provide you the proposed customer solution. So what it's going to look like in AWS, the sizing, the cost, all that's going to be in that proposed customer solution section. And lastly, we provide some high-level benefits and terminology for AWS, just so when we talk to AWS, the solution engineers, they understand from this report exactly what's being built, what's being provided. Some of the things that we look at from that source system includes the versioning of the SAP systems, and then also digging within the components, looking at third-party products, integrated dependent systems. We're going to look at the central instance specifically. Moving to cloud, we will have to re-architect the networking that users are going to connect with the system, so we have to remediate that, as well as looking at if the system's Unicode and if it's running Java. So from all this, we will have recommendations. And then within the Protera FlexBridge platform, we provide real-time notifications on the status of not only the systems and how they migrate, but the overall project. So this will help limit the time that the customer's PMO office has to spend on providing updates internally to the team. So this is provided as part of the tool set. While the migration is running, we get real-time notifications of any errors, as well as many metrics tracking the performance of the migration and notifying us that there's possible improvements that can be made. So for example, running more processes, looking at data remediation, if there's places that we should run more housekeeping, more tables that should have more archiving done, or truncating of data before the migrations run, so we can minimize certain phases as well as the downtime. So migration execution, not only for when errors occur, but for the performance during all phases to make sure we can optimize the performance of the migration and upgrade. And as I mentioned, any errors that do occur, we automatically enter them into a knowledge base. So any problem that we've seen is going to be referenced for any problem that occurs in the future. We enter that automatically, and then that solution is provided as a recommendation for our migration expert to consult as a fix, for this migration. So within the tool set, we provide the reduction of cost, of time, risk, and complexity through the standardization of our tools, as well as best practices, and increasing the productivity and the visibility of the project at the same time. So within FlexBridge, we're very happy to say we've run it many times and have some really good case studies, some really great customer stories that we can share with you. The very first one I'll share is a company based in New York City, Fitch Ratings. They do credit debt ratings for countries. You'll hear them in the radio on PBS. I heard them just last night. I was talking about Venezuela debt. So they provide very important financial services, and they take security and performance paramount importance for their business. So we talked to them 2 Sapphires ago, and they were planning an exact use case for FlexBridge, where it's doing a move to cloud, having a project for that, and then doing their SAP upgrade thereafter. What we proposed as a alternative approach is to combine those, move to cloud, do the SAP upgrade, and HANA migration together. So there's actually a case study with our partner SUSE. This solution runs on AWS, running on a SUSE operating system with SAP HANA for both ECC and BW. And you can see the quote from Managing Director Ranjit, moving to cloud to SUSE on AWS SUSE on HANA on AWS, using the FlexBridge tool set, reduce the cost from runtime and migration by half. A little bit about their landscape you can see here. It's a little busy slide, but want to make sure we have all the information in one place. So you can see the as is and the power of the capabilities of doing all of this transformation at one time. So they not only did a migration on one weekend of BW, but also the ECC environment at the same time. And you can see the transformation of not only the business application, so BW went from 7.3 with BPC 10.0, was upgraded to BW 7.5 with BPC 10.1. That happened at the same time as taking it from Oracle 11.2, running Red Hat version 5, and that was migrated and converted to HANA SPS 12. So that's version 1 SPS 12 with SUSE Linux 12.1. And also consequently, same time concurrently I should say, ECC 6.0 Enhanced Package 5 was upgraded to ECC 6.0 Enhanced Package 8, and then the same transformation of Oracle to HANA and Red Hat to SUSE was done, and the move to AWS all in the same weekend. And you can see the downtime. These are the technical downtimes. They were both run. We brought this down very early Saturday morning. So the downtime by Saturday noon, the systems were back up for Fitch Ratings team to continue to do the post-migration steps, bring the batch jobs up, turn on interfaces, do the reworking on the networking, as well as enable HA. So they have a separate webinar talks about the capabilities of HANA, HA, and DR within AWS using SUSE. We enabled that on Go Live weekend for the new landscape. So tremendous amount of transformation and business value created over this weekend. And I should also mention this full project was an 8-month duration. The half of that duration was just using the test run. So we created the system, did the, as Pete mentioned, copying production to a prod copy system and then doing the migration off that over the internet to AWS. That was done in December. And then for the next 4 or 5 months, the test run remediation using that system as a reference was performed. And then we started in April doing the next dev system and went live in July. So 5 of the 8 months was using the test system, and then 3 months was going through dev, another test run of production, and then copying to quality. And then I'll also mention our really good customer story. Had a really good conversation with Mustafa from Farrar just yesterday, who was the business lead for this project, and that was moving BobJ to HANA in AWS. And the interesting scenario and here is that they actually have their business suite is on premise still. So they have it connected, as you can see in this diagram, going through the network and connecting the AWS environment where they have both their dev and production environments. And again, another case study, this is on the Amazon website, you can see that. It's BobJ on HANA, running on SUSE in AWS. And I also mentioned the business value. There's one slide that Mustafa shared with us yesterday, and that was all the value that was created in their business. And he mentioned just the standpoint of data loads themselves, where that has gone, where he estimated 60% of his team's time was just used on data loads and remediating and fixing problems there, and that's gone to 0 now. He also shared the statistics that there was a 90% reduction in time to build the data models and loading the data in SAP HANA. That reports that were running on HANA were all executed in seconds compared to minutes within Oracle, which is their previous database for BobJ. And also, it's transformed in the 2 years that they've been running on it, how the business actually executes, where this has become an essential tool of how they make decisions in the business. So they can do real-time decisions with information that they're gathering from the field, all real-time. So it's a really great report. We're going to have a webinar just on this customer story coming up very soon. So very, very good business value was created from doing this BobJ upgrade migration to AWS. And with that, I will provide the information here. Feel free to reach out to Kristen to get the information on the free assessment. We have a lot of information on YouTube, prior webinars. Encourage you to attend those or listen in on those. And also have an invite for anyone attending today's webinar. We are very happy to do whiteboarding sessions, customize them specifically for your journey, just so you can talk to the next level outside of the assessment report. But any information, any questions you have specifically on the BW migration going to HANA on AWS or any other SAP systems for that matter, ECC or any other systems that you want to migrate. And so with that, we can switch over to the Q&A section. So I know there's a few that came in here from the beginning, so I'll go with those first, and then if you have any more, feel free to type them in. There's a Q&A function in the toolbar here, so feel free to enter those if you have some. So the very first question that we have was around the downtime factors, and what are the things that can extend that timing for the downtime to make it longer. So it's a good question. This is an area that we really have focused upon because we see that as a big barrier to move, to do a migration upgrade. The first question is going to be, what's going to be the impact of the business? And we see two big considerations there. As we did at a very high level, we summarized the BW housekeeping that's required. So just the remediation steps, which we also identify. We look at some of them in the assessment report. That's a key part. But also the data size, the cluster tables if you have those, and also the networking that you have between that source system and the target AWS environment. That was actually when we built FlexBridge, one of our biggest considerations was around the sizing of the network. And we've come to find out that common sense, customers are building their environments in AWS, and AWS is becoming the data center. So they're going to want to have a very stable, very fast connection to AWS. So that factor is being taken care of itself. So to answer the question, downtime factors, there's two big ones. Is the prep involved, the remediation before you do the migration, upgrade, and also the networking between the on-premise and target cloud systems. The other question here that came in was around, right at the beginning of the presentation, was what can be migrated. So when we say what can be, I think we covered the SAP systems and those applications in that slide. So it's the vast majority. I can think of only a couple that MDM, the Windows platform of MDM is not supported today. It's the only one I can think of off the top of my head. But aside from the SAP applications, from the source systems the source operating systems and databases, we can migrate pretty much any environment from as a source. So mainframe, iSeries, Unix, and then obviously the easy ones are the x86 based ones, which are fully supported today in AWS. That would be Linux and the Windows operating systems. But anything Unix, iSeries, and mainframe, those can be migrated. There just might be some additional remediation steps that have to be performed. So can be done, just might be some additional steps there. So again, that's where the assessment helps clarify the approach. And the last question that came in is around what is the approach? Is there's differences if it's BOBJ versus BW? And it really comes down to, again, if we think of the approach on migration, if it's going to be an as is, or if we're doing some transformation also. When I say transformation, if we're changing the operating system, the database, or if we're doing an upgrade of the SAP application. So those factors are going to dictate what approach is taken in the migration. But again, there's a lot of commonality in any migration, applying the best practices, as Pete mentioned, our approach on the systems, how we approach those, the timing of those, all the checklists that we do, those are all standardized over any approach. So we want to make it simple and simplify and shorten the path to getting business value from these upgrades and migrations. And with that, those are all the ones that came in so far. So, and I know we're running up to our 45-minute limit. So if you do have more questions that come in, feel free to reach out to us anyways, possibly here. And you also have Kristen's information from the communication for the webinar.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.